I'm Rob Licuria, Senior Editor at Gold Derby, here with the Banshees of Inisherin, DP Ben Davis. Ben, first of all, I just think about so many of the scenes where Purrick is walking his donkey along a rustic pathway, or Colm's ambling across the coastline. There's this palpable melancholy that permeates the film. And I found that really impactful. Shades of regret and longing. There's a lot of stuff going on emotionally. Did those themes inform how you wanted to approach the film's look and feel at all?
Yeah, very much so. I think that was they were the starting point. The script is always the starting point. And we wanted those scenes. We picked those particular locations because we wanted the sense of space, but also being removed from the rest of the world. So usually, a lot of those locations that we chose, you show they're close to the water, so you show the isolation of where they are, and then the distant mainland. And it's kind of an emotional. It's difficult to describe for me to articulate it correctly, but there's a distance from and a separation from everything that's happening elsewhere. Even though there's a vastness to the landscape, it's incredibly claustrophobic at the same time.
Yeah, I totally agree with that too, because you do this beautiful job on the film where you shoot through like static spaces to frame a character in a certain way on the screen, particularly if you want to separate or you want to confine. And so many of the scenes do feel quite cramped and airless, if I could put it that way. And then others feel so exposed and vulnerable when they're outside. That was very apparent to me when I was watching the film through the part of the pun lens of what you were doing, and production designer Mark and costume designer Anna. And I'm just thinking, like, so talk me through the intentional way that you framed the film out externally and internally, according to the space around the characters, because I think that's a really big factor in your work on this film.
Yeah, I mean, the truth is that at that time, people's houses, they weren't like they are now. They were single room dwellings, at that time. So that kind of takes you into a certain area, into a certain sort of size and space. There's it's different for each of the characters. I mean, we do a lot. There is a lot of stuff in the film where you're separated, where you're viewing through a window or through an opening, and it's like when Colin first comes to call for Colin when he's sitting there smoking, and there's this barrier. There's already a visual barrier between them before he's actually delivered the line that I don't want to be your friend anymore. Before that's happened, and we constantly play with that during the film. There's a great shot in the pub where Brendan has his kind of new friend, the musician Declan, and he's talking to him in the pub, and you see Porrick, Colin's character, walking away in the background through the window. Those are all storyboarded shots that Martin storyboarded, where we're trying to create this idea using interior and sort of exterior space. And the barriers, the glass and windows and doorways are a theme within it. But the places, I mean, I like to think that, Colin and Kerry's, I'll go to character names, it's probably easier. Porrick and Siobhan's house is an intimate space. And, because I think for Colin, he has everything he wants. And that kind of place with he's got his miniature donkey and his sister cooking his porridge for him. And he's kind of happy within that space, but I think it's also a space that she wants to escape. So it kind of plays in both ways, that space.
Yeah, a lot of what the actors are doing amplifies what you are trying to achieve, along obviously with Martin's vision. And I mean, this is why the film's become so successful, because it begs another viewing, because you do miss a lot of that when you're just trying to understand the story. And I just found this film so rewarding. You recently shared this insight that I just loved, and it's where you don't make much eye contact with some of the characters until much later in the film. and obviously that gives us an emotional distance to them, and we gradually get closer to them. I didn't notice that on the first viewing either. So talk me through that. That's a really nice subconscious thing that you're doing. They kind of giving us a sense of distance until we start to get to know them.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a way of drawing the audience in. So you set them back from the scene to observe it. You know, when you look at a scene, it's always good to look at it and say, well, if I was watching this particular dynamic take place and I was invisible, I was a fly on the wall, where would I want to observe it from? And that's always a good starting point. You know, I always think when you're blocking a scene out. But there was this idea that as things start to become more and more unhinged, particularly I think with Colin's character, but also, you know, no, I suppose with both characters, you know,
Yeah.
that we would gradually put the audience into a place where it becomes slightly uncomfortable because of the proximity of the camera, you know. So I think proximity of camera is always really important, you know, where you're, because it's about where you're emotionally putting the audience. So the idea was to sit them back from it at the beginning, make them feel relaxed, and then as it sort of starts to unravel, you just make it, you almost want to get to a place where it's uncomfortable
Yeah. I
being in
just
there.
I love the intentionality behind some of these choices, because for the layperson, many people will just expect the DP is just going to shoot the film and light it, really make it look really pretty, and Bob's your uncle. But it's just absolutely not the case. And this is a great example of
Well, the
all the
key is that you don't. For me, the most important key, almost in everything I do, is that you don't. I don't want the audience to see
yeah,
that. I mean, if you're aware of the cinematography, I mean, there are some films that call for that. They're kind of the, you know, that's the they're big visual feasts, and they
yeah,
really want to go, wow, look at that shot. But you know, particularly with a film where you have writing that's so particular and so good, and actors of this caliber, you don't want to get the cinematography to get in the way of that. But
yeah.
you'll need to work with it, and you need to massage the audience in a certain way and push them in a certain direction, but you don't want them to know that that's happening.
Yeah, you don't. But I mean, and then when we do notice it, I guess it's a bonus, and it's just and
Yeah.
it's also very much subjective from what the audience is actually thinking and feeling when they're watching the film. From a purely practical perspective, Ben, how challenging was it to shoot the film where so many of these scenes are like in a room that's dimly lit? You know, we're relying on natural light from windows and doorways. I mean, very dark spaces. Was that challenging? I mean, you've done a lot of that work before, but what was it like on this film?
I didn't find it challenging. I found it very enjoyable, to be honest. I mean, I like, you know, I've been doing this a long time, so a challenge, if anything, doesn't feel like it's more of a task that if someone gives you something interesting to do, you know, they kind of perk my interest. But it's, you know, when you're dealing with light sources that would have been candle or oil lamp, they're all flame sources, it's tricky, because the truth is, if you put an oil lamp on a table between four different characters, it's going to do nothing, you know, and in terms of lighting their faces, unless you make it incredibly bright, and then the whole lamp's going to burn out. So everything has to be manipulated. You're telling a lie, like so much of filmmaking. You know, you're kind of creating that illusion. I would say telling a lie. That's not particularly helpful, but you're trying to create that idea. So they're difficult, but you know, because I did that with lots of very small lamps set around the set, hidden away in little crannies and beams that we put up in the
Right.
set. Hid those lamps to create these little pockets of flame light, you know, on the interiors, and the day interiors. A lot of those buildings then had very small windows because it was bloody freezing and you're on the Atlantic coast. So you'd have a small window, but you still put a big light through it, and then you let that hit the floor and bounce around. Then you try and shape that in the room. I mean, it's a lovely way to work, really. No, it's like the film was like working with a canvas all the time. It was terrific to work on. People say it must have been really challenging, but you know, the challenging thing about making the film was we were living that life. We were on this tiny island in a very sort of claustrophobic environment
Yeah.
with a lot of people for a long time, during a pandemic in a way. So if anything, that there was the emotional challenge of that, but luckily no one cut their fingers off or
Thank God. Yeah, that's good. I think yeah, we're very happy about that. The color palette as well blew me away. I'm expecting my entrenched kind of expectations would have been that it would have been very monochromatic, austere, because the spaces are quite rustic, as you mentioned earlier, and they're it's a period film. But there's so much scope for color here. Obviously, apart from the externals, the beautiful greens, but like I really loved how the emerald green of the store really pops off the screen. Colm's home, it's that
Yeah.
mustard yellow backgrounds that Mark
The
so
Van Gogh yellow, that was kind of that was based on.
yeah, yes,
There was a lot that was very high on Martin's priority list. We didn't deliver something that was monochromatic or
really,
dull. He wanted Ireland. He wanted the film to be beautiful because I don't want that. And he really pushed on color, particularly in costume. So the landscape is the landscape. You're right. It's
yeah,
a very limited color palette. You have the blue of the sky if you got blue in it, and then you have the green. So every other element becomes particularly important. And there was a lot of work done on that, particularly with Siobhan's costume, in
yeah.
particular, yellow coat, red. Those were red. I felt, it's like a Don't Look Now thing. I really loved her red coat. I really wanted to push her red coat.
Right.
That they created these beautiful silhouettes or these splashes of color within the landscape. Everything from in the opening of the film, what was hanging on the washing line
That's
was
right.
discussed ad
Yes.
nauseum, to try and create this modern take on an old fable. It feels to me the story the more I look at the film, it feels like a story that maybe 100 years ago you would have gone into a pub or an inn in Ireland and someone would have told you a story. I'll tell you a story about two fellas who lived here, and they might have told you, and it's kind of, but we wanted to be a modern telling of that. So, those colors are authentic colors that would have been around in that time, but they are elevated, and in the photography later on in the DI, we pushed those colors up. We
Right.
isolated those particular colors that we wanted to and pulled them up a little bit to try and accentuate that.
I wondered whether you were amplifying the color in post because that yeah they really pop off the screen, but it still felt really natural to me, organic even, and I just was thinking
Yeah.
maybe it's just my eye being drawn to it. But it's interesting that you were able, and that I'm really fascinated that Martin McDonagh wanted that to be one of the priorities because. Yeah, you could have gone with austere cut a monochrome, and that would have been totally fine. We would have not even worried about it. But like, what are you thinking in your head as the DP when you're thinking, all right, well, we've got some work to do here. We're not just going to go with what we're expecting.
No, we had to do it. Everyone goes, "Oh, it's great scenic work." We had to do a lot of work. With the exteriors, I did a lot of shaping of those with being very particular. We scouted that island. I spent a lot of time at the locations, and most of the exterior shots, or all the exterior shots, are shot in a particular direction at a particular time of day in particular weather conditions that we thought were appropriate for those scenes, because we were very versatile, so we could move where we wanted to. So that was all particularly planned. And we did go in with that, a very specific viewpoint. And I think the idea, the film has some particularly tragic elements to it, and you kind of want to offset. Sometimes you play a scene which is incredible, where you can play against what's happening in the scene with the music, so you can have this terrible thing happening, but there's good. And it was kind of like that a little you wanted the place to be beautiful, but it's hard for me to articulate that island, but there is a feeling when you get there. It is incredibly beautiful, but it's like kind of this melancholic beauty.
Yeah.
Kind of really, it's incredibly striking. I particularly loved it. But, and for some characters, I think that some personalities like my own or age groups, I don't know, it worked particularly well, where I felt completely at home there. But for other people, they find it incredibly difficult, to live in that sort of
I'm so
environment.
glad you said that because I've been trying to articulate this as well with people. Like the island's got these gorgeous stone fences everywhere, right? It just feels like it's like a lost civilization was there, and there is this sense of like regret and longing that you just by looking at it, and that's so appropriate for this film, and it's so
Yeah.
appropriate for Martin McDonagh's work generally. He
Yes,
does
it
this a
works
lot,
very. I mean, he wrote it. I think he spent a lot of his childhood there, so he
right?
kind of he knew. I mean, Martin's very specific. So every single character in the film, every actor who plays that character, Martin wrote for that particular actor. So Colin's part was written for Colin, Brendan's, Kerry's, Barry's. They were all written for that particular act, and everyone who's in the pub, all the smaller actors,
Wow.
they're all particularly written for. And obviously, location-wise as well, Martin was very specific about this is where I'm writing this film. This is exactly where it takes place.
Yeah.
So I think that helps in the whole thing working as one. I think it wasn't like you wrote this film and said, well, where are we going to film it? Let's go to scout locations. It was going to be here.
Yeah, he's particular, and I mean, that's the level of artistry that he's working with. Speaking of Martin, he comes with this dark view of the world and a vicious sense of humor, and really compelling humanity in his films. What do you most value? What did you most value about working and collaborating with him?
I valued mostly his friendship. I think he's those you'd think when you met Martin there would be this sort of darker undercurrent to a warmer outlook, but there's not. He's just a genuinely lovely human being. So working with him was great. Obviously, on this film, and it was the same on Billboards and Seven Psychopaths, is that every time we went to work as a crew, the whole crew, myself included, were excited to get there to see, not just because, it's a beautiful day, we're going to work, but it was, we've got today, like on Billboards, and Frances is in today. She's got that scene with Sam. I can't wait.
Wow.
Everyone's ready, and it was the same on this film. There'd be this anticipation on the set from everyone, from the guy getting the tea for the grips. Everyone would be, and when you were filming, and the big thing, it was quarantine. It was trying to get people off the set. You can't all stay on and watch. You've got to watch. We can't have everyone on the set. It was a pandemic.
Yeah.
But there's this tangible kind of excitement every day about what we were shooting, the work, and people getting their sides and reading them. So that's what I love about working with Martin is, material is just so good.
It's so damn good. Ben, I'm so thrilled that I got to talk to you about this because I love your work in the MCU, by the way,
Okay.
as a Marvel nutter. But I just feel like this Banshees work, yeah, blew me away, man. And I look forward to seeing you at the Oscars red
Thank you
carpet.
so
Fingers
much.
crossed.
That's really, really nice of you. Thank you.